I really do like that music.
I do too.
Hey
Yeah, turn it up so I
there.
can hear it better.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ronnie,
Hi, and I'm Jenny,
and we are,
the Heart and Soul Sisters.
yes, we are. And today we thought we would delve a little deeper into some things. I know, Jenny, this is something, the topic is really important to you. You want to really want to talk about that today.
Mhm.
Just want to set a little framework. When kids experience traumatic events, dysfunction in their families growing up, has an impact on them that lasts a lifetime. There's a great body of research out there related to these adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs as they've come to be called. It's a work that was done out in California through the Centers of Disease Control eventually, where they asked people, adults, nine yes or no questions before the age of 18. Did these things happen to you? And it was physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, substance abuse in a parent, mental illness in a parent, incarceration of a parent, loss of a parent through death or divorce. I'm missing some physical and emotional neglect, and I'm missing one. Did I say substance abuse, mental illness, domestic violence in the home? Maybe I did say them all. Anyway, they asked people these nine yes or no questions, and just did it happen right before the age of 18? And they took that and mapped that, gave people 1 point for each yes answer, and they came up with a score, your ACE score, your average childhood experience score, and then mapped it to. They looked at their medical records retrospectively, and then followed them going forward. And so this work's been going on for 25, 30 years now. And what they found is that if you have one ACE, one adverse experience, you're likely to have more than one. And the more you have, the more increased risk you have, not just for the things we might guess, which are mental health problems potentially, and substance abuse and those kinds of things, but also physical health problems, things like cancer, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, autoimmune illnesses, lung disease. I mean, just a whole range of things. In addition to mental health problems, substance abuse issues, smoking, obesity, all of that. It just it it's the trauma follows you for the lifetime. And what they've come to understand is that kids who are raised in these environments live in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze, and their stress response system becomes dysregulated, like it's on all the time. And so you're pumping all this cortisol into your system because you're, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to hide, trying to be safe. And all of that just wears on the body and creates a greater likelihood of a disease process, starting over the course of a lifetime. And what they also found is if you have four or more ACEs, it dramatically increases your risk of health and mental health problems going down the road. And that's super bad news to me because we had five in our household growing up, and we were
Mhm.
borderline for a couple more. So that's a powerful lot of dysfunction and a lot of stress. And I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about today that is often an outcome of having grown up in these kinds of environments is dealing with anxiety and depression as an adult.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, even knowing that I needed to talk about this, that because it is such a widespread problem among patients that I've been seeing in family practice for the last 23 years. Just knowing, I think in part that we were going to talk about this triggered a 2 day, just really dark place for me. And that's a lot better than where I started, as a kid.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to mention that, besides the addiction and abuse, both of our parents have mental health illness issues that have been undiagnosed and untreated that we just recognize because of their behaviors. Mom went through bouts of depression. in part from of her dysfunction that she grew up with her,
Right.
you know, adverse child experiences. And our dad, I think, was chronically depressed and anxious. And for him, that came out as rage. You know, for both of our parents, it came out as rage. But that was probably his most common emotion that he that he expressed,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah.
And so so my earliest memories of my first where I knew something was really not right was around the age of, I believe, 8. And it was after an episode of, I was doing the dishes by myself after the evening meal, and we all took turn. I think we shared about taking turns with chores and things. And it was
Right.
my night to do dishes, and it was my night to do them by myself. And because of the history of, if dad found something dirty in the cupboard, and sometimes mom did this too,
Mom did
they
it.
would
Yeah.
they would empty out everything out of the cupboard, every glass, every plate, every whatever they found, and all the silverware, and they would literally dump it all in the sink, dump it all on the counter, and make us wash everything completely over again,
Right.
because everything had to be perfect. And so this night, I was trying to make sure everything was really perfect, and I was a little slow. I was 8 years old. Come on, I wasn't like Speedy Gonzalez. And they had their drinks and came in from the front porch, which was their evening ritual, and they were instantly in a rage because I was still at the kitchen sink doing dishes. And so it turned into a screaming match where I could smell the scotch on their breath and the spit from their face flying as they were taking turns literally screaming at me on either side. And that was the first night that I went to bed and just kept asking myself, why am I here? I don't want to be here. Why was I born into this family? God, just let me die. Just let me die. Just take me. Just let me go to sleep and never wake up. And those are some pretty heavy thoughts for an 8-year-old to have.
Yeah.
And that was just one night of many through the years that were burned into my memory of I don't want to be here. And even now, talking about it, I'm starting to kind of shake. And so I went through cycles of depression, and sometimes the depression would come over me like a huge storm cloud, and I might be there for a few days. And there were other times that it stayed much longer. And probably one of the worst cycles of depression was after the birth of my daughter, my first daughter. And I was at the time, my husband had re-enlisted and was being sent over to Desert Storm. We had invited my
Yeah.
parents, and then they invited our brother to all share a house. It started off it was supposed to be a few-month thing to help them get reestablished because they were struggling when they lived in Florida financially. So we said, come on to Nashville. You can stay with us until you find jobs
Right.
and find a place to live. And that turned into much longer than what we thought it was
Two
going
and
to
a half
be,
years.
two
Two
and
and
a
a
half
half
years.
years.
And so Matt, while he was gone, of course, my parents were really working on me. You need to leave him. You need to do, and I had this new baby, and I went through such a horrible postpartum depression, um, and I did go to seek help, and I was prescribed medication at the time, which helped somewhat, but I still had a lot of thoughts of ending my life, and came up with a couple of different contingency plans to do so. And the only thing that stopped me at that point was that I knew I did not want to leave my daughter to what was going on. I was in counseling at the time. I knew it wasn't healthy. I felt trapped. And you, Ronnie, were my lifeline at that time because we had started talking to each other. And that's truly what kept me, I think, from acting on those really dark thoughts. And after years of this going on, I realized that I kept trying to hide this from people. And I know at the time you knew I was unhappy, but I didn't share with you all of what was going on.
No, you didn't.
And because I think in part it's a conditioning of just the dynamics and the abuse and addiction stuff of denying things, right? We're not always truthful with ourselves, let alone others. And
Right.
and I think also part of it was I didn't want to be a burden to you. I didn't want to be weak. I wanted to be strong. And so I think that I felt like if I deny it or if I pretend even temporarily that it's not there, that it'll go away. And the problem with that is when you have wounds, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether it's whatever it is, when you have wounds that you are walking with, stuffing things down, ignoring them,
Right.
does not make them better. Makes them worse over time. They fester, right? And
Yeah.
so I when Matt came home, as we had more children, as we got our own place, obviously, when he came back from Desert Storm, I still had these cycles. And what I would do is try to go through the motions of my everyday, take care of the kids, take care of the things I needed to do, but I felt detached or kind of dead inside. And it was that numbness that helped me to just keep going. I was in and out of counseling for a number of years. I know you've shared that.
Right.
And I just can't imagine where I would be today if I hadn't taken those steps. But those cycles of depression and anxiety still came. I think the anxiety is always there to varying degrees, but it would really kind of resurface, kind of like this horrible storm. And the last cycle that I had was probably about 8 years ago. That was pretty bad. And I had come up with another plan on how I wanted to exit. But I knew I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do this to my kids, to my husband. And I didn't want to do this to you, Ronnie and Jim and Michael. And it was actually, I think, my daughter, her breakup with a boyfriend and she had been struggling with anxiety since she was a child. I mean, this runs in her family, and it was definitely passed on
Both
to
sides.
some of my, and definitely was passed on to some of my children. And when she went through that really deep depression and I was really worried about her safety, that's when I thought, I've tried to hide this as best I can. I mean, it's not that I didn't talk about depression and anxiety symptoms, but I never went there in terms of sharing with my husband or my children how dark things got for me at times. And it wasn't until maybe this last decade that I actually shared more with you, Ronnie, about some of those really, really dark times.
Right.
And the kids, when I started having this conversation with my one daughter, the other two younger ones kind of, kind of like magnets. It's their intuition is like up, their antennas up. When we're talking about something deep, it's like a flock. They all come in. So we talked we talked very openly and cried. And I shared about how I've always wanted to be open with you children. I've wanted to be honest with you, but I've also tried to shield you, just like I haven't told them all the details of all of our incidences of memories, of our childhood. because I don't want to burden anyone. But I did share with them in that discussion, because I was trying to convince my daughter to please consider counseling, and she was very resistant to going. And so I did share about my past episodes, about of wanting to leave this world early, before my time, and how difficult it was to talk to them about that, because I never never wanted them to feel like somehow it was their fault, somehow they let me down, or my
Right.
husband either.
Right.
And of course, my husband was upset that I didn't talk to him about these times. I mean, he knew I was depressed. I told him I was struggling with depression at those times, but he didn't know how close I was at times, to checking out. and it was a turning point for my family, I believe, to where we tried to take this, I think, a little more seriously and give each other more compassion, more understanding, and and to be more honest, with where each of us are at any given time. It's not perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all, I believe, in process, learning and growing. But I believe that, that all of these experiences are adverse child experiences, the depression, the anxiety, the ADD, the different, mild learning disability issues that are also in our family are ways for us to connect with other people and understand where they may be coming from. And I know, as a provider, I've never shared this with patients, and only rarely shared with patients in terms of, when talking about depression. I've said, when we struggle with depression, it is an imbalance that, that takes a combination of sometimes medication and counseling and other things to help us heal. I know for me personally, I need to be outside. I need to be in nature. So much so that I've always, that was our safe haven when we were children. We would escape to the outside and spend all day outside. Yeah. And that is still my escape. That is still my safe harbor, is being with trees and animals, and to the point that we live on this farm. And it brings me so much joy, and exercise is crucial for me. I've got to go for long walks and hikes. I need to move. But just like meditation and yoga helps me as well. And prayer. I've definitely gone to prayer, through the years. So I know that when I've talked to patients and they've come in and they've like, I need help. My family, my husband, my spouse, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my kids, or my parents say I need help. And yet many times when I talk about this with them, and that it's a you got to do things to nurture yourself, counseling, and then, okay, maybe some medication. Oftentimes they come back for a recheck appointment and they're like, well, the medicine seemed to be helping, but I stopped taking it. I don't want to take any pills. And I try to ask them, so what's the difference between when I saw you last time and this time? What has been going on? Well, I have a friend at work, or I have this person or that person in my life that told me that I don't need pills, and I should be stronger, and I can just get over this myself. And so there's all this shaming that still goes on in our society, even when family members or friends recognize that you're struggling, you're hurting, you are suffering, and yet they're going to shame you for taking a medication or going to counseling or doing other things to try and nurture yourself when that's exactly what you need to be doing now in that
Right.
moment.
Right.
Um, and, and so, what I would say to these people is, you know, if you had high blood pressure, or if you had high cholesterol, or diabetes, do you think this person would tell you not to take your insulin or your blood pressure medicine, or whatever it is that you needed? And they always look like, well, no, I don't know, I don't think so. It's like, this is really not very different. And I
Right.
know that there are other ways that we can heal our depression without medication. We know counseling alone is tremendously effective. And lifestyle changes, getting more sleep and exercise and really good nutrition, lots of vegetables and fruits and seeds and nuts and all that really nourishes the body. Um, but sometimes people need medication, even if it's for a short time. And I feel that, even just talking about depression is so difficult, depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's why it was so important to me that we touch on this, because I think what we really need when we're hurting in any way is just for somebody to be present with us. Um, None of us want to be, generally speaking, want to be a bother to somebody. We don't want to burden somebody. We don't want them to feel bad. We don't want to bring them down, right? We
Right.
don't want to be a
Right.
downer. Um, but but in order to be there for somebody that you love that has depression and anxiety, sometimes I think we just need to hear, it's okay. If you need to cry, I'll sit with you while you cry. If you just need to just be with somebody, I will just sit with you in silence and just be with you.
Right.
Not to fix me, not to give me the solutions to what's going to make it all better, but just to be present with me. And and you've been there for me, Ronnie, so much. And I am so grateful that you have really tried to be supportive, to be loving, and to be understanding, even though it's sometimes hard to understand the storm
It's
clouds as they blow.
but it's
So,
it's very easy to be with you, and it's very easy to love you.
love you too.
I have felt bad all these years that I have not struggled in the way that you have. And at times when we've talked about, our growing up and the impact that some of these things may have had on us, I always said, you had it worse. And you never liked it when I said that. You would say it was just different for you. You had different pressures than I did.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been grateful that I have not struggled with depression. I had one episode when I was in college that was extremely unusual, and I experienced some depressive symptoms, like sleeping to try to get the time to go by for 12 hours, and things like that. But it was situational. It passed. It wasn't anything like what you've described. And I thought, well, I'm that's not my cross to bear, right? That's not part of who I am. Um, and then just last week, I team teach with a clinical psychologist, and I teach in a program on health, right? The biopsychosocial context and consequences and experiences of health and well-being. And she was talking about childhood depression, and she was talking about how, well, if you have depression as a child, or you grow up in a household with these average childhood experiences, it increases your risk of depression in adulthood. And I raised my hand. We're teaching online as everybody is now. And I said, so if you get to a certain point, like if you get to adulthood, or if you get to the age of 30, or 40 or 50, does that mean that you've outrun it? And she said, nope, it does not.
Oh, bummer.
Oh, that is super bad news.
Yeah.
So it's, but I mean, but on the other hand, I want to say that, we sort of emphasize the link between these adverse experiences and these negative mental and physical health outcomes, and the fact that we had 5, which puts us above the 4 threshold. It's not a perfect correlation, right? I mean, many people have these experiences and don't have negative health consequences because maybe it's about the severity or the duration, or they're a little bit more resilient physiologically, or whatever it is. So it's not a sentence, right? You shouldn't be waiting your whole life for the other shoe to drop, but it's understanding where these things come from, and particularly when it's mental health manifestations, because of the stigma associated with, like you said, if I get, hypertension and had to take a pill for that, no one's going to fault me for that. But if I confess to someone that I'm struggling with depression, all of a sudden there's all this shame and guilt and finger
Right.
pointing and you should be stronger. It becomes this moral issue about
Right.
my strength of character, as opposed to
Or lack of faith, or yeah. I mean,
right.
it becomes a whole on so many levels,
Yeah.
of shaming and you're weak. Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
and it's like, I mean, it's like my curly hair, That's what I got dealt. It's
Yeah.
it.
Right.
I tried
We don't mind
for
that so
years to
much, though.
I
Oh
tried
yeah,
for
we
years to
did.
straighten this stuff out,
Yes.
man,
Yes.
and try to make it silky and
Right.
soft and
Right.
smooth and
Right.
non-frizzy. And it's like, it is what it is, and
Yes.
that's what's I think so important about this is that, I mean, nowadays I'm so grateful to be on the 30-year slot, the 30-year side of where I started with this depression. And I am, most of my days, I wake up in gratitude and in joy. I go to sleep in gratitude and in joy. Do I still have some dark storm clouds that come over my head? Yes. And it's always typically been around the holidays, our parents' birthdays, their anniversary,
Right.
their, Mother's Day, Father's Day, the typical. And I did have I think I shared with you before, Ronnie, it was Mom and Dad's anniversary, and it was a warm, sunny day, for up here. And, I just was having a really hard time that day. I woke up that day knowing it was their anniversary and feeling that black storm cloud hanging over my head. So I thought, okay, like Dr. Kim Duramo has said, I'm not going to try to stuff this. I'm not going to try to ignore it. I'm going to sit with it. And much like we did when we were kids, when we had screwed up or misbehaved or whatever, we were sent out to weed the bricks, right?
When we were fighting, that
Oh,
was a
that's
common
right.
thing.
We were
Yeah,
fighting.
we were not getting along. We'd be sent out
That's
to weed the
right.
bricks, or
Sent out to
fill a
weed the bricks.
5-pound coffee can full of rocks.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I went out to my stone walkway and I started weeding. It's an ongoing thing. And it was really, I just thought, okay, I'm by myself. If I feel like crying, I'm going to cry. Because crying has been a difficult thing for us when we were kids. We were told, you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that wasn't a pleasant thing.
No, we
didn't want a whipping.
didn't want that alternative. No.
No. So we learned to stuff those feelings. But so I'm getting better about letting those kinds of emotions out. So as I was weeding, it was really very therapeutic, for me. I weeded and weeded and weeded until my hands and my back and my knees couldn't take anymore. But at the end of that, it really felt like I was just being present. I was letting the emotions come as they were surfacing. And it was really amazing because at times it felt like I was weeding some of that old pain out of my heart. And truly by the end of the day, I just felt so much lighter and so much better. And so these storm clouds, when they come over me, they don't last for months. They don't, not like they did years ago. And I'm really grateful for that, because I'm at a place where I'm learning how to nurture myself, how to care for myself. And as I do that on a more daily basis, it's helping me to release another. It's like that onion, right? You just peeling away another layer of that onion, and there's still some more layers to peel, but it's getting easier as time goes on, I guess,
Yeah.
is what I want to say. And part of that is because I came to a place of self-acceptance. I'm not using carbs and sugars like we did as kids, and like in our house, and like I did for years, to
Yeah.
stuff those feelings, to try and numb those feelings.
Right.
They're not as frightening to me as they once were. And I
Mm-hmm.
have learned that I can embrace that pain and send love to myself and love to wherever that pain came from. And I can accept it, and it releases so much more easily
Yeah.
than it ever did before.
It's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see you happy.
Thank you. So I just encourage anyone that may be listening, if this speaks to you, um, to send yourself lots of love and compassion, and accept the light and darkness that is in you, that's in all of us. That's
Right.
what we're here for. We're here to grow, and we're here to learn, and to grow in love, truly. And that starts with our own hearts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. We absolutely would love to hear any feedback, comments. As Jenny said, if this speaks to anybody, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
in the
So
meantime,
sending you so much love, light, and blessings.
absolutely be well, all.